Let's go to Milo Yiannopoulos in London. First of all, Milo, before we turn to the alt-right and Paul Ryan and what's going to happen with Paul Ryan going forward, let's talk about you're a media expert. They're desperate to change the subject, and they've got a wall of noise up this morning like I've never seen it before.
Hey, boss. Isn't it remarkable? Actually, this is connected to the alt-right Paul Ryan discussion, because it seems now that metaphor is beyond the pale in American public life. Like, you can't use colorful language. I mean, we have friends who've been banned from Twitter for saying they want to take people out when they clearly meant published journalism about them. They're using metaphoric language that has even the slightest hint of figurative language relating to violence of guns is now apparently the equivalent of a death threat. This is ridiculous. This level of political correctness, and it's not just blanket political correctness applied to everybody. It is selective political correctness applied politically to certain people. Is so ridiculous. It's so stupid. And you know what's so great about Trump? He obviously just doesn't care. That's why so many people like him.
Here's the thing. She had a terrible day yesterday. The one thing the left, I think, that's really disturbing them is that every day is a bad day for her. Let's talk about the Orlando having the father up on the stage. Clearly had to go through some sort of Secret Service screening, and he puts up the sign.
Of course he did.
There's no doubt in your mind about that.
Gun control. How dare they? How dare they? I went down there after Orlando, and I gave a talk, as many of your listeners will know, millions of people have seen it now, about the left and how it panders to and sucks up to radical Islam, and how it doesn't protect gay people, and it doesn't. All it's interested in doing in the aftermath of tragedies is bleating about gun control, when actually the opposite would be what made gay people safer. How dare they put him up on stage? What an insult to gays. It's absolutely appalling. I think it's part of the reason why so many homosexuals are abandoning the Democrat Party. The last election in the UK, 50% of gay men said they were going to vote Conservative. And there is a gigantic gays for Trump movement. And I think it's fueled partly by this sort of tone-deaf idiocy from the Democrat Party. How dare they put him on stage? Awful. I thought awful.
How insulted are you that to your intelligence, she gets up there and while he's on the stage in camera view and holding up the sign about gun control and banning guns, that she gives us talk in honor of the victims that we just find out that day were literally disfigured by this cretin, right? He just not just killed them, he continued to put bullets in them, and she does not use the word Islam or radical Islam the entire time.
Well, I don't use the word offended lightly, as you know, and I think people who do deserve to be taken out and shot. Oh, there you go. See, that kind of metaphoric language you can't use in America anymore. But it was insulting, and it was offensive. And this is the brazenness of the left in America that has taken me completely by surprise. As a Brit, people would be too ashamed. They would never have the sort of chutzpah that it takes. Your son did this, and you're standing up there making posturing politically with signs for this candidate who's funded by countries.
By the way, that is breathtaking. Your son murders in cold blood 49 innocent people, many of them very, very young, out to have a good time on a Saturday night. Murders them in cold blood, disfigures them. He is a monster beyond comprehension. And you come and stand on a stage and back of somebody running for president and going to put a sign in our face?
It's that you don't have the decency to retreat from public life and just maybe go home, start reflecting on your bad life choices and the terrible job of parenting you did. Think about, the faith that you introduced that child to that might have led him to do those awful things. No, you don't do that. You go make a homemade sign about gun control, suck up to Hillary Clinton for what? For press? For attention? It's so shocking.
We're going to connect some dots here. This is with Khan. Khan is a Sharia, he's a Sharia compliant lawyer. He's an expert in Sharia law. We're not so sure how much about a U.S. law he knows because they're still trying to figure out if he has a law degree from here. We're pretty sure he doesn't have a law degree. However, this guy, by the way, is a supporter and a guy who ran for president of Afghanistan he's a supporter of the Taliban, which is the most austere and most radical branch of that kind of radical Islam. I mean, this guy's an active supporter of the Taliban.
I mean, as a European, I came over to America. I was looking out at the political spectrum, trying to work out who the good guys were, who the bad guys were, who the crazies were. The right in America. A lot of conservative voters are very joyful and happy and jubilant, like the Trump supporters seem to be very happy people. A lot of Republican voters in America are angry and outraged and quite have hair triggers. And I used to think that that maybe it was a bit much, and maybe they should chill a little bit. But now I'm starting to see, as I've been in America for a year or more, the brazenness and just the horrifying brazenness and just shamelessness of the Democrats. I was deeply, deeply shocked to see him on stage. Not primarily because I was, personally offended or feeling insulted by it, but just because it showed such incredible lack of awareness, lack of respect, lack of basic human decency. And I think that's missing from left-wing politics in America. And it is shocking.
Let's talk about left-wing politics. By the way, my guest is our editor of our tech vertical and also the head of our social justice warrior beatdown society. It's Milo Yiannopoulos. And by the way, we're going to get a lot of big announcements about the Milo tour coming back to the United States. We're going to get to all that early next week. But Milo, you wrote just another brilliant piece on the alt-right. Paul Ryan in the stumble, by the way, Paul Ryan, hat-tip to Paul Ryan, won very big yesterday in his home district, I think 80-20 over Paul Nealon, but he did have to jettison some of his core beliefs, like on TPP. He threw that right over the side. We're going to talk about that in depth in the next hour. But the one thing, in a radio interview, he starts talking about this new brand of conservatism that's starting to rise out of this kind of populist nationalist movement, which is called alt-right, driven really by young people, right? Young thinkers, young activists. And he had some he went right to the left-wing playbook. Walk us through what happened.
Well, this was quoted on Twitter approvingly by a formerly successful diminutive commentator, and he didn't even get the name right to begin with. He called it alt-conservative, so he hasn't really looked into this very much. But it's interesting that his instinctive, his knee-jerk, his first response was immediately to dismiss them as a nationalists, white nationalists, all the rest of it. What's really happening is this. The Trump phenomenon wasn't created by Trump. Trump has taken advantage of frustration with globalism, with globalization, frustration with open borders, frustration with wages being depressed, frustration with law and order. And many of these concerns, and in addition to that, concerns about freedom of speech, about Western culture being preserved from, immigration from certain bits of the world, and, the total rejection of political correctness. These things have sort of congealed to become something that we now call the alt-right. And that represents at least half of the Republican base, and probably a lot more than that. And by the way, a lot of those characteristics are shared by Bernie supporters, for instance. I mean, they're a bit more keen on the political correctness, but they're not so keen on, some other bits. So, it's a sort of young, mischievous, dissident, anti-establishment strain of politics that represents a huge proportion of Republican voters. What does Paul Ryan do? Call them white supremacists and say they're terrible. They don't believe in what we believe in. This isn't the Constitution. That's not my kind of conservative. Well, Paul Ryan has just advertised to perhaps over half of the Republican Party that he is not interested in them, and that to score points, to appear politically correct, to appeal to the right people, he's perfectly happy to throw them to the wolves. This is the perfect demonstration of why GOP lost to Trump, if you like. Because, if you're one of those people that thinks he's building an entirely new party sort of from within the ashes of the Republican Party, as I do, then, I think that's a fair characterization. This is why we have Trump, because the Republicans have started treating their own voters with the sort of contempt and disrespect and dismissiveness that liberals used to.
This is, by the way, this is why David Floof, we're going to get to this later, David Floof, who's I think the smartest guy around Obama, he said, he's been quoted in the New York Times on his Twitter feed, he says, hey, it's not good enough just to beat Trump. We have to destroy this movement. A big part of this movement, the philosophy underneath this populist nationalist, is this alt-right. Now, what Paul Ryan tries to do is said, hey, these guys are basically the Hitler Youth. They're just nothing but a bunch of white nationalists. What say you, Mr. Milo Yiannopoulos?
Couldn't be more wrong. And, this is what the left always does. It conflates race with culture so that people are too scared to talk about their own cultures. If you, for instance, quite like Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Wagner, Mozart, Beethoven, Bizet, Walt Whitman, you might think Western culture is quite a good thing, and we actually invented some quite good stuff. We now have a good system. It's, modern, democratic, liberal Western capitalism is a system in which women are most free, gays are most free. You can pretty much do whatever you want in life. And it's not bad being born into any of those countries. This is why people say the West is best, because it is. Now, if you conflate that with race, you're getting into dangerous territory, because if you say the West is best, what people hear is, oh, you mean white people are best? Oh, you must be a racist. Well, that's not what people are saying. That's not what the alt-right is saying. I mean, there's a very small racist contingent on the alt-right, but there's a moderately sized racist contingent on the left.
I want everybody to listen to the following, and then we got to jump. But Milo, you brought something, and we're going to put it back up on the homepage today. Milo Yiannopoulos' retort or answer to Paul Ryan was incredibly powerful. But you said, hey, what this movement really is and what Trump really represents is not just American exceptionalism, American supremacism, in that the fact that American values, what America has done, has led the world to freedom.
Your values are the best values. And you know why? Because America is a country founded on principle and idea, not on ethnicity or geography. Europe has a long, bloody history born out of, the way that those states evolved. But America was founded on ideas. And those ideas are the best ideas. It is the best nation that human society has yet created, because it is founded on the best principles that human civilization has yet come up with for how to live a good society, how to create a good society, how to live a good life, and how to make everybody as free as possible. America is the best, and people should not be worried about saying so. And Trump clearly, in a way that Hillary does not, clearly loves America, and I think that's what's galvanized a lot of support behind him. And the Democrats should not underestimate the power of American patriotism, which comes not from racism, but from a considered and correct assessment that America's way is the best way.
Milo Yiannopoulos is the head of our high-tech vertical. You can get him every day on Breitbart News. He also has a podcast. Tell people about the podcast, Milo, because I know more people want to sign up for it.
Of course, it's a runaway success, actually. I'm very happy to, never out of the top 100 podcasts worldwide. We keep hitting big numbers. Roger Stone recently. This week is Eric Prince, who I know comes on your show very regularly. So he's talking about women in combat and Trump and various other things. So there'll be a few little teasers on the site. So Friday night drops Eric Prince, former Blackwater CEO, former Navy SEAL. It's become a really, really very popular show. I thought it was going to be a sleeper hit, but actually it's just a hit.
No, I think it's number 3 on Podcast One. We were just checking the other day, number 3 as far as podcasts go. A huge audience. Milo, by the way, just one last thing is that the graphic novel yesterday, Clinton Cash Blue, opened at number 6 on Amazon. They've never had a graphic novel.
Incredible? Incredible. And Chuck Dixon, who wrote it, who's a huge name in comic books. He did The Punisher. He did, I think he's worked on Iron Man. He was the guest on my show last week. So if you subscribe now to the Milo Yiannopoulos show, which you can do at Breitbart.com, it's in the sidebar and you can find it on iTunes and Podcast One, all the rest of it. If you do that, the last episode that is out now is a 45-minute conversation with Chuck Dixon, the guy who wrote Clinton Cash. He's talking about the politicization of the comic book industry and the Clintons and a bunch of other stuff.
Milo Yiannopoulos, head of the Breitbart High Tech Group. Milo, thank you very much. We're going to put your answer to Paul Ryan up on the lead. Thank you very much, Milo Yiannopoulos.